Good morning. And welcome as we gather in this sacred place. As we gather filled with the beauty and bounty of this day. As we gather embraced and enfolded by the love of our God. This is a place of goodness, a place of community. And it is good to safely gather together in this place and through the gift of technology and Facebook Live. As I've noted over these past few days on our Facebook page, October 16th, Friday, was named as World Food Day. It's a day named by the Food and Agricultural Association of the United Nations. And it's a day when we're invited to intentionally bring to heart and mind issues of hunger and food insecurity and land use and food waste, both locally and globally. It is a day to recommit ourselves to works of justice. This year was the 75th anniversary of World Food Day, and the theme for this year is a call to remember that our actions are our future. Our actions are our future. And so I thank you to all who take action to make a difference. Those who have responded to our invitation to support our Grab-and-Go lunch program and Grab-and-Go pantry, and those who do those things, whether it's the support of the food bank or sharing of food from gardens to make a difference in our community around issues of food insecurity. And so it seems appropriate today as we gather pondering issues of hunger that we gather at a table to nourish our spirits. We do hunger for food, but we also hunger for love and for justice and for peace and hope. We hunger to an end for this pandemic. And we hunger for compassion and for healing, and hunger for an end to division and racism and violence. Sylvia Dunstan, the Canadian hymn writer, writes, "All who hunger gather together." And so we gather to share in those gifts that nourish us body and soul and spirit. And so as we gather, I hope and trust you received your communion kit, and those who are joining us online have prepared their own communion elements that we may share in gifts of creation and creator, gifts of vine and gifts of earth, as we celebrate God's love that embraces us and nourishes us this day. As we gather together this morning, as always, I draw your attention to a number of announcements in this morning's bulletin. This week's bulletin is dedicated in loving memory of husband Robert and son Donald by June Cameron. Thanks be to God. I do invite you to go through the announcements that are on the back of your bulletin and also on the reading insert. Especially paying attention to the information around the hut. The hut is back in our narthex since we are moving down into the church hall for our coffee hours. The hut is there and has been replenished with some new items. Also, the book nook continues to operate, and a reminder that those donations to the books go towards the work of mission and service. So I invite you, when it's safe to do so, to take a look at the hut and the various items that are there. Last week in worship, we were invited to create our gratitude flags. And the plan is that those flags, when we receive them, will be put together and then they will go out into Spiritland. If you received a flag and you completed that, there is a basket in the narthex where you put your completed flag in. If you didn't have an opportunity to pick up a flag kit, there's also a basket there with flag kits with markers for you to take home and then return. And then when we have them all together in a few weeks, we'll have them all placed out in Spirit. As we gather together this morning, we do so Those who gather this day across our province, those who work on land and those who work on sea. And we do hold our common desire for peace. It's not about taking sides this morning. It's not about an us or them. But it's about how do we live in relationship with one another. How do we live in relationships of respect and understanding and peace when division tears us apart? That's a struggle that many are facing. It's a struggle that our world is facing, our province is facing. It's a struggle of faith, that living in relationships of peace and unity in the face of division. And so we come to this day bringing that struggle, but also aware that our faith speaks to that. And I hope and trust in our gathering this morning, there are words of wisdom that enable us and empower us to be people who bring about healing and compassion and peace to places of brokenness. I invite you to hear these words of wisdom, these words of challenge that gather us around us this morning. If the hunger of others is not my own, if the anguish of my neighbor in all its forms touches me not, if the nakedness of my brother and sister does not torment me, then I have no reason to go to church and live. Life is this: to love one's neighbor as oneself. This is the commandment of God. Love means deeds, not good wishes. For this reason, I commit myself, we commit ourselves to working for the needs of our brothers and sisters. Let us be gathered in prayer. Spirit of life and goodness, we gather. Here we are waiting to the mysteries that humble us, the sacred that embraces us, the hope that enfolds us, the beauty that fills us, the community that sustains us, the wisdom that transforms us, the love that deepens us. Here we give thanks for the richness of our living. Spirit of life and goodness, gather us. We are not alone. We live in God's world. As worship, embraced by our God, source of all love. We believe in God, who has created and is creating, who has come in Jesus, the Word made flesh, to reconcile and make new. Let us worship, inspired by the Christ, love incarnate, who works in us and others by the Spirit. Let us worship, to love and serve others, to seek justice and resist evil, to proclaim Jesus crucified and risen, our judge and our hope. In life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God. Today in worship, we are marking World Food Day. And we're also doing that by sharing in gifts of God's love as we seek to share in communion. Now I have a question. Did everyone receive as they came in? Everyone? Now, what would have happened if when you came in, John or David, whoever was at the back there, said, well, only if you're sitting on this side of the church, you get to have communion. How would you folks feel on this side of the church? You would move. You're going over there. What happens if we said, well, only those who don't wear glasses get communion? How would us folks with glasses feel? Left out. Not a good feeling to feel left out. Not a good feeling to be hungry and feel left out. To see that others have food, perhaps even more food than they need. It is said often that the issues of hunger, whether it's in our community, our country, or our world, is not about not having enough food. We have enough food. It's about who has the food and how that food is distributed. How many of you have compost bags in your kitchen? And how often do not only those scraps go into the compost bag, but maybe something that you made too much of goes into that compost bag? Or if you're being in a restaurant and fast food place and see the amount of food that actually gets prepared for people, but it's too much, so it gets put into the compost, or worse, into garbage. World Food Day invites us to think about those issues, about the food we have and the food we can share. And we do share our food. We try to do that through the work of our food bank, or the work of our grab and go. They are ways that we seek to make a difference. They may be small ways, in the midst of thinking about hunger in our world, but even small ways make a difference. So this morning we are going to mark World Food Day and invite those who are able to turn to your bulletin as we share some goes this way. O God, to those that hunger, give bread, and to us who have bread, give the hunger for justice. On this World Food Sunday, we bring to mind that though we have made great progress in reducing hunger, still 1 billion people in our world suffer from chronic hunger. 1 in 9 people do not regularly get enough nutritious food to live healthy and active lives. Over 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient deficiencies, or what is called hidden hunger. And our children are the first generation in history whose life expectancy is less than our generations, and that's due to food insecurity. The reasons for this continuing tragedy are complex and interrelated. Poverty, greed, drought, and other weather-related problems, dwindling water sources, environmental degradation, inequitable distribution of wealth, and unjust economic systems, food loss and waste, population growth, and today the impact of COVID upon our economy and our global food systems. Food insecurity, hunger is a complex issue. We can feel powerless, but we are not. Hear these challenging words of wisdom that Jesus shared. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me. Our scripture tradition, the way of Jesus, the call of faith, reminds us that helping those in need is not simply a matter of charity. It's a matter of justice. It's our responsibility. And so it is that Pictou United Church is one of the founding partners in the Seeds of Hope Community Garden. And every month we intentionally support the needs and ministry of our Pictou West Stand. Our Grab and Go Outreach Ministry provides over 100 lunches, which are offered without stigma or judgment to the students at Pictou Academy. And on an ongoing basis, we keep our Grab and Go pantry stocked with items to meet the ongoing hunger and food insecurity needs of PA students. It may be a drop in the bucket of world hunger, but it is a drop. And so we commit ourselves to living out the words of Jesus, of sharing what we have, who we are with others, making a difference. Where the world is merciless, where the world is hopeless, where there is injustice, where there is sadness, where the world is doubting, where there is ingratitude, where there is confusion, where there is weakness, where the world is wounded, Where the world is weeping, where the world is despairing, where the world is troubling, where there is no tenderness, where there is loneliness, where the world is dying, where there is darkness. May our lives change the world, one person at a time. May our lives be the presence of Christ, in the mystery of God, and our heartbeat. I know many of us are missing singing together. Though we cannot congregationally sing together, we can use the gift of music and the gift of words and the gifts of action to share the message of God's love. You remember? Like a rock, God is under our feet. Like the starry night sky, God is over our heads. Like the sun on the horizon, God is ever before. My favorite part, like the river runs to ocean. Get that wiggle. You still get that wiggle. Like the river runs to ocean. I forgot my thing. Our home is in God, and we're more. A big time. So David's going to play for us the music, and we'll move through the music with our actions. Our home is in God. We are God. We are bearers of God's image in our world and for the world. And so all that you all have to offer does make us. Thanks be to God. Thank Jeannie, and those who want to join Jeannie downstairs are going to make their way downstairs to the hall for our time together. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me. Dom Helder Camara was a Brazilian archbishop. He lived in a time of Brazil, of social unrest, a time of great divisions between rich and poor. Dom Helder began to understand that the way of living, of what was happening in his country and in those communities, those divisions of those having more than enough, of those having barely enough, issues of oppression and suffering were not of God. That God's way, God's realm was about something different. God's way, God's realm was about a time when all would have enough. That the abundance would be shared. That no one would know suffering or oppression. Dom Helder lived his life helping the people that he served, the poorest of the poor. It wasn't very popular. The political leaders didn't like it. The religious leaders thought he was rocking the boat. But the people responded to the words of Dom Helder. The people grasped onto that vision of God's reign, God's kingdom of peace and justice and compassion. That vision of God's kingdom proclaimed in the words of Jesus. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. The words of Dom Helder grace the front of our bulletin this Sunday. They're often quoted words that he spoke. When I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist. We are called to be about the work of justice. Yes, sharing our food with the poor, in the words of Dom Helder, but also asking, why is there injustice? Why is there suffering? Why is there inequity? And so it is that we come together today to be nourished in that work, for it is hard work. It is not easy to be people of faith. It's not easy to live out our faith in our daily lives. To speak up, to speak out, to be engaged in works of peace and justice and compassion. And so we gather at the table to be nourished by gifts of bread and wine. This is God's table. It is a table of love. It's a table where we are filled with love. And it is at this table, and at the tables of those who are not here, and yet with us, that we give thanks. We give thanks, for this is a time when we are formed and loved into God's beloved community. A community where all have a place at the table. We who have much faith, and we who have little. We who have been here often, and we who have not been here for a long time. We who have tried to follow, and we who have sometimes failed. All of us, each of us, have a place at the table. All of us, each of us, are invited to share in the gifts of God's love so that we might be nourished by those gifts. We share the peace safely with one another. It is our way to acknowledge God's presence, the presence of the sacred in each other. For we are the images of God. God, all that is sacred, abides in each of us. The light of God's love shining through each of us. The Namaste acknowledges that the holy in me sees the holy that is you. I invite you just to simply turn to one another and to the Namaste. Acknowledge Namaste. The holy in me meets the holy. The holy in me meets the holy in you. The holy in you meets the holy in me. And we gather at the table. We gather at this table, remembering that this is a table for all. When we gather at the table and share in the gifts of bread and wine, we are nourished and sustained to go out into the world and to widen that table, to widen God's love as we live out that love through our words, our actions, our lives. Jan Richardson reminds us that it is our task to make the table wide, and to make it wider, and to make it wider still. She writes, and the table will be wide, and the welcome will be wide, and arms will open wide and gather us in, and our hearts will open wide to receive. And we will come as children who trust that there is enough. And we will come unhindered and free. And our aching will be met with bread, and our sorrow will be met with wine. And we will open our hands to the feast without shame. And we will turn toward each other without fear, and we will give up our appetite for despair. And we will taste and know the light. And we will become bread for a hungry world. And we will become drink for those who thirst. And the blessed will become the blessed. And everywhere will be the feast. And we will become bread. We will become bread for a hungry world. And we will become drink for those who thirst. The bread of blood, the cup of God's love, gifts of creator and creation, gifts of herb and gifts of vine. These are the gifts of God for the people of God. And we are invited to share in those gifts that we might be nourished and sustained, that we might become bread for a world that hungers, that we might become drink for a world that thirsts. As we safely share in the gifts of bread and wine, you're invited, as you feel comfortable, to remove your mask, to share in the gift of bread and wine, and then to place in us. Come, share in the gifts of God's love. I invite you to join with me in our communion prayer printed in the bulletin. We give thanks that we have gathered together in our safe and sacred places. We rejoice in the giftedness of each person that has shared in this feast. We are grateful for who we are for each other. May we continue to be truly thankful in all we do and in all we become. Joining our prayers and lives as one, we pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. We do give thanks for all who have gathered. We give thanks for gifts of bread and wine that nourish us and sustain us. We give thanks for gifts of community that uphold us and enfold us. We give thanks for gifts offered this day and gifts offered each and every day. Gifts that truly make a difference in our community, in our world. Gifts given in support of the work and ministry that is ours. For all this and so much more, we give thanks. We thank God for the food before us, for the shelter around us, for the community beside us, and your love between us. Amen.
Oh
We do give of thanks. As we were reminded last Sunday, Thanksgiving is not simply a day, it's a way of living. It is an attitude to embrace the possibilities of each day, the opportunities, as we also know the struggles and the challenges. But we go into the world with an attitude of thanksgiving. And in that attitude, it opens our eyes and hearts to see one another and to see each day, to see each person with different eyes. A reminder again about our gratitude flags. If you haven't completed yours, please take a moment to offer your gratitude. And if you didn't pick one up last Sunday, please pick one up. As we spread that attitude, that way of being into our community and into our world, and it does make a difference. We do make a difference. As you have been loved. As you have been welcomed. As you have been fed, feed. As you have received, give. And may the boundless love of God, the grace of Jesus Christ, and the presence of the Holy Spirit be with us always. Blessed be